Don't be fooled. Some people walk in quietly, wearing sandals, and change everything, without raising their voice. And the most curious part, it's usually the ones no one notices, or worse, the ones many underestimate. Because there are still those who believe that appearance defines worth, that respect is reserved only for those dressed in expensive clothes. And that's where the mistake begins. A mistake that comes with a price. Sometimes it costs a job, sometimes an entire company. This is one of those stories that stir both the mind and the heart. People judging without knowing, businesses failing at the front door. And the best part, or the worst, the twist always comes. When the truth is revealed, no suit can hide the shame. And you're about to see just that, a sequence of real turnarounds where simplicity exposes arrogance and teaches a lesson worth more than any MBA. If you've ever been ignored, judged, or underestimated, prepare your heart. This story is for you. And if you've never experienced it, maybe it's time to rethink how you treat those who enter your life without making noise. Helena arrived at the store with gentle steps and simple sandals on her feet, but carried a lifetime of accomplishments on her back that no one there seemed to see. The environment was upscale, decorated with lavish shoe displays, and the saleswomen, immersed in their own bubble of judgments, didn't even look at her with respect. One of them whispered with a mocking grin that real customers don't walk in wearing those kinds of sandals. It was the kind of comment many hear in silence, but over time, it teaches deep lessons about arrogance and appearances. The problem wasn't Helena's shoes. It was the mindset of those who only see value in labels. It happens more often than we think. The delivery man ignored at the front desk, the cleaner treated with disdain, the humble old man underestimated in a meeting. These are stories that don't make headlines but reveal the abyss between what people show and who they really are. And there lies the mistake, judging before listening, looking before understanding. Helena wasn't there just to buy a pair of shoes. You know what stands out the most? How certain actions say more about those who commit them than about those who endure them. The way we treat the invisible people in our daily lives says a lot about our character. And those who learn to value human beings over social status end up seeing opportunities the arrogant will never notice. But those saleswomen didn't know that, yet, and they had no idea who that woman in simple sandals really was. Few knew, but behind Helena's simplicity was a story, built with discipline, courage, and a lot of study. A retired teacher, she had turned her passion for education into a startup impacting thousands of young people across Brazil. It wasn't just a company, it was a purpose generating millions in revenue, which now positioned her as an investor in the very chain of stores where she had been disrespected. An ironic twist life often uses to teach humility to the arrogant. Helena never sought applause, she sought transformation, and perhaps that's why she didn't care about heels, expensive handbags, or clothes aligned with the appearance dress code. While many spent energy trying to look rich, she invested time helping others grow. Founding a social impact business demands vision, empathy, and a whole lot of resilience. And even after reaching success, she chose to keep her feet on the ground, literally. That disturbed those who believed value was measured by store displays. The most curious part is that these great stories are usually written in anonymity. Helena's achievements weren't posted on social media or featured in magazines. They lived in the eyes of young people who dared to dream again, in classrooms restructured with technology, in families who were grateful for a chance. And that's why she was there, in that store, not to indulge in luxury, but to ensure her values were being honored. But for that, she needed to see everything, up close. Helena's presence there wasn't a coincidence, it was strategy. The store chain's new board wanted honest answers about customer service, and who better than someone with real-life sensitivity to do it? The plan was simple, a discreet visit, no warnings, no golden name tags, just the raw truth of how ordinary customers were treated. Because let's be honest, it's easy to smile at someone who looks like an executive, but how are you treated when they think no one important is watching? She walked the aisles with keen eyes, mentally noting every gesture, every judgmental glance, every muffled laugh. Helena didn't need cameras or digital reports. She just needed to observe, and that's what many people overlook, the details. The way the saleswoman hands over a bag, the willingness to help without rushing, the tone of voice when answering a simple question. In a world obsessed with metrics, human care is still the greatest differentiator, and the best stories are born when someone chooses to truly pay attention. This kind of test reveals much more than an employee's resume. It reveals values. It reveals empathy. It shows whether that store is just a facade or if there's purpose behind the brand. Helena wasn't just evaluating customer service. She was evaluating whether that place fit into the future she wanted to build. And although no one knew it at the time, the notes she carried would weigh heavily in what was about to come. The next morning, an extraordinary meeting was called. The store employees walked in without knowing why. Some were still laughing about the previous day's events, unaware of what was coming. When the door opened and Helena walked in with a calm smile, the room fell silent. The woman they had ignored the day before was now seated at the head of the table as the new partner of the company. The shock was visible and revealing. Every face told its own story. Helena didn't raise her voice. She didn't point fingers. She simply opened her folder and began reading a report that outlined, with surgical precision, every flaw she had observed in their service. She spoke about posture, expressions, absences that spoke louder than words. It wasn't a scolding. It was a lesson. One of those life gives us rarely, but that stay with us forever. And the most powerful part wasn't the content. It was the composure of the person delivering it. She was teaching with firmness, but also with humanity. With every line she read, the room sank deeper into discomfort. And Helena, without ever losing her calm, concluded by saying that respect should never depend on badges, brands, or status. It begins when we understand that every human being carries a story worthy of attention. And in that moment, without shouting or handing out immediate dismissals, she transformed the company's culture and took the first step toward something even greater that was about to unfold. Maria walked into the cafe like any other customer, looking for a good coffee and a bit of peace. But what she found was a cold atmosphere, sideways glances, and a barista visibly bothered by her presence. "Minimum charges required here," the employee said before even asking what she wanted. It was as if Maria's simple clothes and calm demeanor didn't belong. But little did they know, they were about to become part of one of the company's most powerful stories. Prejudice is a door many people close without realizing it. In their rush to judge, they forget that every person carries more than what meets the eye. Maria, with her gray hair tied in a bun, wasn't just a customer. She was the very founder of the coffee shop chain, who had stepped away years earlier due to health issues. And there she was, returning as if she had never left. Disguised? No, simply being who she always was, testing what remained of the essence of her creation. How many times have you been judged by what you wear, how you speak, or where you come from? These stories aren't fiction, they're reflections of reality. And Maria, in that cafe, realized that time doesn't just change people, it reveals who truly understood the mission. The bitter experience of that espresso would be just the beginning of a plot twist no one saw coming, especially those who believed kindness was tied to how a customer looks. Behind that calm expression and simple clothing, Maria carried decades of experience, sweat, and purpose. She was the one who opened the very first coffee shop using her own savings, planting seeds of hospitality when no one else believed. Over time, she turned her passion for artisan coffee into a well-known brand, always valuing human-centered service. And now, after stepping away for necessary health reasons, she decided to return. And she did it in the most authentic way possible, as an ordinary customer, with no facade. The goal was clear: to understand what had changed in the soul of the company she once dreamed into existence. But what she saw didn't please her. Robotic employees, judgmental glances, forced smiles. The space seemed more focused on aesthetics than experience. Maria sat quietly in a corner, drank the bitter espresso, and swallowed, along with the coffee, the disappointment of realizing the culture she had carefully built had been lost. But those who know great stories understand that every fall is also an invitation to rebuild. And rebuilding doesn't mean starting from scratch. It means returning to the roots. Maria knew the journey wouldn't be easy, but she also knew it was necessary. While the people around her treated her like just another customer, she was mentally noting everything that needed to change. Every detail was a loose thread in the tapestry she had once woven, and she was ready to pull on those threads, gracefully, yet firmly. Because when the owner returns to the room, everything changes, even if no one notices right away. While the employees focused on appearances, Maria did what she had always done best: observe. She jotted down in a small notebook the details that any rushed manager would have missed, from the wait time at the counter to the impatient tone in responses. She wasn't just evaluating the service. She was listening to the soul of the place, trying to understand if any trace of the care and passion she once taught still remained. And there, in the clinking of cups, new stories were being born. It's curious how a silent analysis can be more powerful than a formal audit. Maria noticed how the employees avoided eye contact with people who didn't seem to fit the space. She saw how Wi-Fi and visual appeal were prioritized, while genuine smiles had disappeared from the menu. And you know what's saddest? Many places are like that. Beautiful on the outside, hollow on the inside. A coffee shop can't survive on specialty beans alone. It needs human warmth. That phase of the visit was crucial, because more than judging, Maria wanted to understand. She wanted to know whether the detachment came from lack of training or poorly taught values. It wasn't about punishment. It was about learning, and above all, about restoring a legacy. A legacy she wasn't willing to let fade. There was still time to turn that cafe into a true stage for meaningful stories, and the next step would be decisive. Days later, the phone rang at the coffee shop. It was a call from headquarters, summoning staff to a meeting with the new operations lead. When the employees entered the room and saw Maria seated at the head of the table, the impact was immediate. She didn't have to introduce herself. The silence said it all. What seemed like just another customer had revealed herself as the founder, back in charge. And with her came changes. Changes that would mark the beginning of a new chapter filled with remarkable stories. Maria didn't raise her voice or point fingers. She simply and firmly laid out what she had observed. She gave examples, read excerpts from her notes, and most importantly, shared a vision for the future. She announced empathy training, process restructuring, and a new customer service policy rooted in what she had always believed: respect above all. Employees who showed goodwill were invited to grow with the company. Those who clung to arrogance lost their place. Simple as that. It was the beginning of a silent revolution, one that started with a bitter coffee, but ended with a collective awakening. Because companies are not made only of products or services, they are made of people. And when the right people are in the right places, the impact goes far beyond revenue. It reaches the soul of the brand. And now, with Maria back at the helm, she knew the next step would be even deeper, involving new spaces, different experiences, and other stories that also needed to be re-examined. Lucia walked into the building as she always had, with firm, discreet steps, and her hair tied back in a practical bun. No one there knew who she was, and maybe that's exactly why no one cared. In the elevator, no one made room, no one greeted her. A man sighed impatiently because she took 2 seconds too long to press the button for the 17th floor. Just another woman out of place, in a sea of tailored suits and phones too busy to notice. And right there began another one of those stories that only real life can write. The most interesting part? That woman was one of the company's newest investors. As part of a billion-dollar international merger, Lucia had acquired a stake in the business precisely to understand its internal culture, and she decided to do so without telling anyone. No special badge, no welcome speech, just the raw, unfiltered truth. And what she found was a polished surface hiding an environment of coldness, haste, and vanity. The kind of place where kindness gets lost in high-rise corridors. These moments reveal who we truly are. It's easy to smile in an important meeting, much harder to stay kind when no one's watching. And during that silent elevator ride, Lucia realized how much the company needed to relearn something basic: humanity. What she saw wasn't just poorly executed processes or flawed numbers. She saw a lack of empathy, a void where genuine connection should have been. And from that moment, she decided to observe even more closely, seeking truths that no report could ever capture. Lucia wasn't just another investor. She was one of those minds who don't settle for investing capital. She wanted to invest values. Behind her gray hair and calm smile was a seasoned executive who had built her career creating human-centered workplaces, where leadership meant listening and decisions were made with awareness. She invested in that company because she believed in people's potential, but she also knew that numbers alone don't sustain lasting stories. That's why she chose to act differently. Instead of formal visits and sterile reports, Lucia relied on her attentive gaze. She roamed the halls, listened to break-room chatter, noticed the exhaustion hidden behind forced smiles, and took notes. She understood that a company's culture isn't in its mission statement on the wall. It's in how the security guard treats a delivery driver, or how an intern is heard in a meeting. Every gesture was a clue, every silence an answer. And the more she observed, the clearer the gap between the speeches and the practice became. This kind of presence, discreet but strategic, is what separates true leaders from occasional investors. Lucia didn't want a company that simply hit targets. She wanted one that could tell good stories, both inside and outside the office walls. At that point, she hadn't yet revealed her name or title. But every decision she would make from that moment on would profoundly shift how the organization approached respect, inclusion, and humanity. During her quiet visits, Lucia knew that personal perception wasn't enough. She needed to show. With prior authorization from the board, she reviewed internal footage from common areas, reception, hallways, elevators. What she found weren't just recordings, they were scenes from a dormant corporate culture. Impatient employees, curt treatment of outsourced workers, indifference toward those without important badges. These were real stories of silent disrespect, repeated daily with no audience. Until now, these moments weren't used to punish immediately. They were used to illustrate a point. Lucia prepared a visual report where each video clip was paired with reflections on culture, empathy, and reputation. These weren't criticisms. They were invitations to awareness. She demonstrated how every small gesture affected the company's atmosphere, and how such behavior drove away not only talent, but opportunities for sustainable growth. It was a practical lesson on what business books don't teach. Those who attended the presentation understood, sometimes painfully, that respect isn't a bonus. It's the foundation. Lucia made a point not to mention names. The goal wasn't to shame, it was to transform. And it was this subtlety that earned her even the skeptic's attention. Because it's easy to defend values in a year-end speech, much harder to uphold them when no one is watching. And precisely for that reason, what came next would shake the company's entire structure and redefine the future stories it would be able to tell. After gathering evidence and comparing every observation with the company's core mission, Lucia decided to act. But not with mass firings or harsh memos. She chose something deeper, purposeful restructuring. She gathered department leaders, presented her findings, and issued a challenge. Transform the workplace into a space where people wanted to stay, grow, and belong. And she made it clear, anyone unwilling to evolve with this new vision would become part of a past that had no place in the company's next stories. She brought in organizational culture experts, implemented active listening training, created anonymous channels for reports and suggestions, and more than that, she started walking the floors regularly. She showed that leadership doesn't live behind closed doors. She proved that those who invest with heart also demand results with soul. In no time, the murmurs gave way to meaningful conversations. Awkward silences turned into constructive dialogue, and empathy became visible even in the smallest interactions. And as with every true transformation, the impact began to reach beyond the company walls. Partners noticed the change in attitude, candidates started seeking the company for its renewed reputation, and internally, inspiring stories began to emerge. Stories of employees who were once invisible and were now stepping into leadership roles. Lucia didn't just change processes, she restored the dignity of a workplace. But her journey wasn't over yet. She knew other places also needed a watchful eye. Like the hotel where the next lesson was about to unfold. Francisca stepped out of the rideshare car with firm but humble steps. She carried only a worn-out backpack, wore comfortable clothes, and had on simple glasses. As she entered the revolving door of the five-star hotel, she immediately felt the sideways glances. Receptionists exchanged looks, whispered, and one of them, with a dry smile, asked if she was lost. They had no idea they were about to live one of those stories that turns the tide. One that teaches without raising a voice that judging by appearance can come at a high cost. The prejudice was subtle, but constant. The clerk didn't check her name properly, insisting there was no reservation under it. Only after Francisca insisted and showed her digital confirmation was she escorted, with no welcome, no courtesy. She was taken to the most basic room, despite having reserved an executive suite, and no one realized that the woman in front of them was, in fact, the new majority partner of the investment firm negotiating a merger with the hotel chain. One of those silent yet decisive chess pieces in the corporate world. That first impression said more than any report ever could. And the most curious part? The coldness of the service wasn't an exception. It was the norm. Francisca took mental notes of everything, from the indifference at the front desk to the concierge's bored expression, because she knew that behind every business there are human stories, and understanding how a place treats someone who doesn't look important is the best way to know if there's a future there. And yes, she was just getting started. Francisca wasn't there to relax. She was on a mission. Her presence was part of a confidential evaluation to decide whether that hotel chain would receive a multi-million-dollar investment from her international platform. No badge, no announcement. The plan was to feel firsthand what it's like to be treated when no one knows who you are. And in that experience, she began to understand why so many customers felt disconnected. There was no soul. There were no good stories. She observed everything. How long it took to be served, the impatient glance when explaining the menu, the way smiles only showed up for guests in suits or with designer bags. It was a kind of service where luxury was confined to marble floors and polished silverware. There was no warmth. And Francisca knew that this kind of refinement is what makes businesses collapse without warning. Because nowadays, people look for more than comfort. They seek connection, authenticity, and respect. In her notebook, every observation became a point for reflection. Would they treat my mother like this? How many stories of invisibility have passed through this lobby unheard? These questions guided her analysis, and deep down, she already knew that hotel didn't just need investment. It needed a revolution in how it saw human beings. And that revolution, as always, would begin with a seemingly simple gesture that changes everything. Days after her checkout, the hotel management received a formal email from the international group negotiating the merger. The subject? Field evaluation. Central unit. Signed by Francisca. The impact was immediate. No one expected that the woman with the simple backpack was actually the new majority partner of the investing company. And there, in that document, were detailed accounts of every service failure, not to destroy, but to rebuild. A feedback report combining critique with proposals, pain with solution. A masterclass in stories that deserve to be told differently. Francisca spared no details, but she also didn't use the report to attack. She highlighted the errors with empathy, suggested solutions, recommended training programs, and pointed to real-life examples of hotel chains that regained their reputations by changing how they saw their clients. It was an invitation to transformation and to humility. At first, management resisted, but when they realized the gravity of the observations and the potential impact on the chain's future, they accepted the challenge, starting with leadership, which immediately underwent retraining. Today, that hotel is seen as a model, not because of its decor or gourmet menu, but for the culture of respect that began to take root after that episode. The team was trained to see people before appearances, and every new employee now goes through a module on humanized hospitality. Francisca didn't just invest, she reignited purpose, and like every good mentor, she left quietly, leaving behind a trail of beautiful stories still being written by others. Now tell me, how many times have you seen someone ignored just because they didn't look important? How many stories of silent injustice have you witnessed or lived through yourself? The world is full of good people being dismissed for wearing flip-flops and empty people being celebrated for wearing a tie. But you, what kind of person have you been? If these stories made you reflect, that's great. But don't stop there. Start practicing this new way of seeing in your daily life. Greet the person who serves your coffee. Truly listen to those who've never had a voice. Look beyond the clothes, the accent, the label, because a single gesture of empathy can be the turning point in someone's story, or in your own. And if you want to keep learning through stories that inspire, challenge, and transform, go ahead and subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave a comment below. Have you ever been underestimated for looking too simple? We want to hear your story too.